Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here today. We have one big headline that we're going to cover. It is, of course, the anniversary. Is anniversary even a good word to use for this? Isn't that something you celebrate? No, I guess not. Anyway, we're marking the 1 year to the day that Trump whipped up a bunch of crazies to descend on the United States government in Washington, D.C. and have an insurrection. And who better to mark this day with? Josh Holland, host of We've Got Issues, the podcast. We do have issues, and this particular day shows it perfectly. Josh, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, I think we should start with
where do you start, right? Where do you
start with the video of Chuck Schumer calling it an erection. I mean, I really think that's a good start. We got it. Let's pull it for fun.
No mistake. There will be a trial, and when that trial ends, senators will have to decide if they believe Donald John Trump incited the insurrection against the United States.
God, I'm 12. I'm a 12-year-old. You're a 12-year-old too.
Yeah.
No, that was
I'm
hilarious.
a 12-year-old boy, not the girl's boy.
Yeah, that was great.
You could totally see him be like, insurrection, knowing he was going to be a meme forever.
Insurrection.
Pretty sure that's the best part of this whole thing. All right, so
is that the only thing that good to come of this whole debacle?
That was going to be one of my questions. You know, the narrative on the right about January 6th is that it's a mass distraction from what they're calling the disastrous year we've had under President Biden. How much of the coverage of January 6th do you believe is kind of fear-mongering and keeping us whipped up? Or do you believe that the level of coverage is getting in the mainstream news is justified?
Oh, I absolutely think that it's justified. And I would say that, this is an ongoing coup attempt. What began last year is still happening. There was a report out this week about over 160 officials who had rejected the results of the election are seeking office as secretaries of state, as local election officials. And of course, most people expect Donald Trump to run again in 2024. So this is an ongoing issue. It's not something that happened last year. It started before the election. I wrote for months and months and months that I didn't have any special insights, but it was very, very clear. The writing was on the wall that Donald Trump was going to contest the results of the election and try to remain in power. So it didn't even start a year ago. It started 2 years ago. He started delegitimizing the election a year before it happened. He started before the Democrats had completed their nominating process.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, that it's an ongoing coup and it's not done. I have heard people discuss their thoughts that he is actually not going to run again and that he's just pulling another graft on the American people. What are your thoughts?
I have been of that opinion as well. So, I mean, it takes a lot of work to run, but the real thing that I think is that I don't believe that his ego could survive another loss. And I think somewhere in his, in the dark recesses of his noggin, he knows that he couldn't deal with another loss. And, there was a poll released recently that found 62% of Americans don't want him to run again. I think that the polls would look really bad for him. And he wants to string it out and get attention and raise a bunch of money. The structure of his PAC is, he has a leadership PAC or whatever it is. I don't know all the details, but it's the most flexible kind of fundraising vehicle. So he can spend that on whatever he wants, and he can spend that to finance his lifestyle. And he's raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and he will continue to do so. So I think he's in it for the attention. But I had Mary Trump on my podcast, and she was like, "Nope, he's running." So
that's too bad.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that one.
Let's hope. I mean, there's still a little bit of time here.
I mean, maybe we need to beat him again to show that his brand of crackpot xenophobia is not a winner.
I mean, it wasn't a winner last time either by 3
It wasn't a
million
winner in
votes.
2016. I mean,
Yeah. So
lost the popular vote and would have lost the Electoral College had Comey not released that second letter, right? It's
yeah.
pretty clear there was a significant shift in the polling after Comey's second letter, 11 days before the election in 2016. And so we should have dodged a bullet in 2016 as well. He also won 45% of the popular vote in the primaries, in the GOP primaries. So it's a fractured field. He got in because the other 55% did not rally around any of the establishment candidates.
For good reason. They don't deserve a rally.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been a good opportunity for the Republicans to, save themselves from this. They've certainly tied themselves. They can't get rid of him. They're kind of stuck with him because of their base. And, he's given them permission. The base he's given the GOP base permission to, embrace their worst tendencies and express them their worst opinions out loud very loudly. So
what do you think the best there's the committee meetings and the looking into Trump's malfeasances? What do you think the best possible outcome could be of the January 6th investigations?
Well, there are different tracks going on. I think that I've been so far pretty impressed with the Select Committee, the House Select Committee investigating January 6th, just in the way that they've done communications unusually well for a democratically led committee, right? I mean, maybe that's part of that is just Liz Cheney, who's a horrible, horrible person, but has been extremely good at holding her GOP.
Yeah, what's up with what she's doing? Why is she? She was the only one who went to like Biden's, speech today, or the moment of silence and whatnot that they did in the chamber.
Yeah, it's very, very weird having her not be on the wrong side of things is very odd. It's disconcerting.
Right.
Like if you followed her over the years, you're like, wait a second, is she on the right side of an issue this time? So I guess it is possible.
She just wants to be the next whatever. If there's an opportunity, she's certainly not going to win any higher office by doing what, given how much they hate her already. But if there's an opportunity to be like a centrist person, if the Republicans want to come
doesn't
back
have a
from
centrist
crazy
bone
town
in her body. She is so not a centrist.
Yeah.
And
but I mean, the difference between what's a centrist Republican and what's
we shouldn't think of centrist. There is a small number of Republicans who accept the basic structure of that we're a democratic republic, and that is the thing. It's not a left-right thing. And they're few and far between. But obviously, Liz Cheney and apparently her father as well, which is very weird. Today he's still alive. that guy's a vampire. He's never gonna die. Yeah, he can outlive us all. Yeah, he drinks the blood of. I don't know that that's true, but that people say he drinks the blood of virgins,
babies and children.
Yeah. Anyway, so today he condemned the Republican leadership in very explicit terms, harsh terms.
It's funny if like Trump is Satan and Cheney is like a vampire. It's like a vampire coming out being like Satan is bad. It's.
I guess the thing is that there is a fealty to the institutions. I think the Cheneys have a fealty to the institutions of government. You can be very right wing and very destructive and have bad politics and still kind of have a fealty to the United States government and the
Well, they have
Congress.
profited so much from the structure as it was.
I
Why
mean,
would they want to change anything?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't want to give them
But
credit.
they still believe in
because
government, basically.
They still believe in government.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
and
the
they
two.
believe that, like, if they lose an election, they should lose an election.
Right.
I mean, that's
Knowing
such a
that
fundamental thing. Is like, you lose an election, you lose an election. It's weird. Karl Rove came out and attacked the right, attacked Trump for his endless lies and stuff like that. And that one I found really contradictory because
Yeah.
this is a guy who whipped up a mob to contest an election in 2000.
Wow.
So it's
You're
like,
like scurrying
wait a
out.
second, man. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very weird. Where's George W. Bush? He also been very you'd think any one of
some
these
ugly paintings.
Yes, he is. Any one of
Painted
these
something
former
ugly.
presidents might be useful to get the Republicans to kind of back off, but I don't know if that's the way forward.
I don't think it's possible. I mean,
No.
I just don't think it's possible. And if you see like the reaction of the MAGA crowd to Trump just saying you should get vaccinated, this is they have created a monster, and it is independent of its creator at this point.
Right.
Just,
I think that actually that point that you make, that was the turning point when they really turned on Trump. I mean, Trump has been using them, has been profiting off them, squeezing them dry, giving them basically nothing except something to rage about, which I guess is enough, guess, for them. I don't know.
Well,
and then he said, go get vaccinated,
Yeah, that was just it was remarkable. And he deserves so much scorn for setting the right on this course of COVID denialism and minimizing COVID. And he has indirectly, been responsible for so many deaths, unnecessary deaths. And it really, he set this tone early on. He said it was a hoax. He said that there would be no deaths, no worse than the flu. We know from Bob Woodward that he was saying other things in private.
Yeah.
But, that set the course that actually has been picked up by the entire right, even internationally.
Yeah.
You see MAGA stuff at like anti-vax protests in Europe. You'll see QAnon stuff. And
I got a funny QAnon
conspiracy.
I got a funny, at the end of the show, I'm going to play a funny conspiracy theory recovery circle parody. So that should be pretty funny. I don't know if they really have these, but if they do, get involved. Here's the other point. So let's talk about, what'd you say? The dog is off the leash. They're unhinged. They're not beholden to their leader anymore. So what are we expecting now? Like, how can we, as people who want there to be a government, a democratic government, what are the best ways for us to push forward to protect the democracy that we have and expand it? Because, it's not as robust as one might hope.
Well, I mean, that's the $64,000 question, right? I mean, the thing that I know that we can't do is assume that we're doomed and get complacent. It really does require engagement. Like I'm going to be going to a local school board meeting, for example, because that's where the action has shifted, right? It's the same people who organize.
But you're going not to cover it. You're going to go.
Yeah, I'm just going as a citizen.
I got elected to the town council here in my local.
Good. And that type of stuff is really important. I think that
I'm afraid to go. Like, okay, I'll do it. But
that's what they want. They want you to be afraid to go. They want us to be afraid. They want us to think that we're, facing this overwhelming movement and be fearful. And we can't do that. We can't do that. So I have cautious optimism. I have not come to a point where I'm despondent. I think that as skeptical as we should be of law enforcement and intelligence, they are certainly good at breaking up rings of violent people. They're good at breaking up terrorist plots. They've had a lot of experience with that. Again, it's a touchy subject. Obviously there are always civil liberties concerns, very valid civil liberties concerns. I think that we're seeing a change to a degree. I don't want to overstate it in the media coverage. I think that there's less both sidism than there was, although it's still a big problem. I think that
it's much harder to like push it over. Like,
yeah,
I don't think so. I don't. Yeah.
I mean, if you look today, it is there is massive gaslighting coming from the right. It's really amazing. And this is a debate, I guess, to a degree. That we're going to win this debate. I mean,
even people on the right during the insurrection last year, people on the right were like, this is an outrage. And now they've come to embrace it because the right-wing talk machine has convinced them that it's fine.
That it's either fine, that it is both fine and a false flag attack.
And a false flag. That Antifa
it is both. It is both of those things, because
I don't know how
they don't need any coherence, right?
How do they convince you that Antifa is black people, but everyone was white there? But it's, I guess, people in whiteface going because they're Antifa. Like, how do they even make that jump? I don't understand it. So that Antifa whipped up the whites?
Years ago, I realized that there is no consistency or coherency or logic or anything, and you just make yourself crazy even looking for it. So it's a matter of repetition. They hear it over and over and over and over again. They're hearing different things. So when Tucker Carlson does his, like, it was a false flag, it was a federal operation designed to entrap patriots, like that, they'll be like, okay, that's what it was. And then they'll switch to Newsmax or OAN, and they'll tell them that it's Antifa and that there were no patriots, or the patriots were peaceful, and they'll be like, okay.
Even though they saw it with their own eyeballs, and one of their own police officers is dead.
Yeah, there was just a survey released, I think today or earlier this week maybe, that found that Fox News viewers were 15 percentage points more likely than other Republicans to believe that the Capitol riots were mostly peaceful protests. So,
Josh, so moving forward, is an indictment or something against Donald Trump, be it coming from the AG in New York or from one of these committees, is that the final outcome that people are seeking? And then if he gets
convicted, that's what people are looking for. I mean, that's what a lot of us are
run again. Like, the whole idea is to get him. I mean,
yeah, I mean, so I am skeptical that will happen based on historic patterns where we don't hold people at the top accountable. I am concerned that Attorney General Merrick Garland, in his justifiable desire to restore the Department of Justice's independence from the executive branch and to depoliticize an agency that became very politicized under Bill Barr during the Trump years, that he is going to overcompensate and
do nothing.
And worry. They're not doing nothing, right? They're already going after lots and lots of people, not only at the level of like idiots who went into the Capitol, right? So they're going to, there's an investigation underway for of Rudy Giuliani. We know they're looking at Roger Stone. They're looking at Sidney Powell. Those are people in Trump's relatively inner circle, with Giuliani very much inner circle. They're maybe looking at Steve Bannon. I don't know. So it's not going to be nothing. But the question for me is really like, these riots were part of a broader attempt to a broader coup attempt. And the question for me is like, whether they will be going after uh, the rest of it, and whether whether that stuff is actually criminal, right? You have the phone call to officials in Georgia asking them to find 12,000 votes and overturn the results of the election. That is potentially criminal. The stuff that, like the PowerPoint that Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff, received that suggested that Trump could declare a state of emergency and remain in power. He didn't do that, right? So that's probably not a crime to consider things. It's not a crime to think about doing bad stuff. You got to do bad stuff. Will they charge him for... They are creating a framework, and I would, if I can just pitch my podcast this week.
Please.
We talked to Marcy Wheeler.
I love her.
Yeah, and she's really good on this stuff, and she is much more optimistic than a lot of people that there will be accountability. And she was talking about the framework that they are establishing to show that people who didn't directly participate in the mob can be held accountable for attempting to obstruct a official proceeding, namely the certification of the ballots, and by urging the mob on. And although that legal framework has not been applied to Trump, it could be. And then you have other stuff like, I've long thought that it's much less likely that Trump will face any consequence for what he did in office, then, he'll get busted for tax fraud or insurance fraud. And in a state, in a blue state where prosecutors have obvious incentives to not look the other way.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, that guy's a dirtbag.
Like New York, everybody
always has been.
Everybody in New York wants to see him get his comeuppance because of all the terrible things he's done in New York City to New Yorkers, whether it's real estate and racist stuff and all of that, his whole history.
And like we all know that he's been. I mean, so I should be cautious here. There have long been many allegations of money laundering, all this stuff. And he's always seemingly gotten away with it because nobody's really investigated, right? So now you have probes underway, and we'll see what happens. This is a crucial year.
Oh, gosh. And it does on some level, I'm just about to talk about the movie Don't Look Up, and on some level it does feel like, okay, we have to save this democracy, but also we're all going to die soon if we don't. It's okay, on some level I would like to see there be a more pressing, this kind of full court January 6th coverage press on
climate,
the critical climate chaos that we are facing.
An absolute emergency. It's
so
crazy.
It does. There is a point where you're like, okay, great, get him, do the paperwork, whatever you're doing. The democracy is intact. It survived. It's not going to continue to survive all of these crises that we're going through, in addition to, that are all linked to global climate change. So can we?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, and my big fear is that as the climate disaster becomes more aggravated, we will face contests for scarce resources that will make people more reactionary. And I'm
already seeing that at the grocery store. There was no lettuce. People had gone mad,
fighting over the spinach.
They're like,
that's the big worry. I think that's our big worry. But Well,
we'll take it one day at a time, one crisis
so much
at a time.
So much for not
leaving on a hopeful note. Yeah.
Hopeful note.
I think most people are putting stock in possibly blowing up the filibuster to do some voting rights legislation.
You are seeing absolute movement on that key issue. It's clear that there's the pressure appears to be working. You should absolutely call your senators.
And that would be the big lever that we have at this moment to kind of make sure these insurrectionist things don't happen again. because the more
Yeah.
democracy there is, the less a small number of crazies are going to be able to
Hijack it.
Thank you so much, Josh Holland. We've got issues. Look for the podcast wherever you can find podcasts, and I appreciate you coming on the program today.
Thanks for having me, Julianna.